It's my dad, sir. Those four words, spoken by a 7-year-old girl covered in bruises, sitting alone on a gas station curb, stopped 12 Hell's Angels dead in their tracks. Not one of them moved. Not one of them breathed. Because in all their years on the road through all the violence and chaos they'd seen and caused, none of them had ever felt anything quite like this. Before we go any further, if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and follow along until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The afternoon sun over Millhaven, Wyoming was the kind that didn't care about anything. It beat down flat and indifferent on the cracked asphalt of Route 9, on the peeling paint of the Sunoco station, on the rusted ice machine that hadn't worked since 2019, and on the small, crumpled shape of a child sitting on the concrete curb near the air pump. Nobody had stopped for her. 3 cars had pulled in and out in the last 40 minutes. A trucker had walked past her on his way to the bathroom and hadn't looked down. The teenager behind the register had glanced through the window, then gone back to her phone. Nobody stopped until the motorcycles came. You heard them before you saw them, 12 bikes rolling in formation off the state highway, the rumble of their engines filling the valley like something primal, something that made the back of your neck prickle before your brain could explain why. They pulled into the Sunoco in 2 tight rows, leather and chrome and road dust, and before the engines were even fully cut, people were already moving away. The man pumping gas on the far side grabbed his nozzle and kept his eyes down. A woman crossing the lot with a Diet Coke reversed direction without explanation. The patch on their backs said everything people thought they needed to know. Hell's Angels, Wyoming. Jack Grave Lawson cut his engine last. He was 53 years old, built like something that had been through a lot of weather and was still standing. His beard was iron gray, his hands were scarred at every knuckle, and his eyes, dark brown, almost black, moved across every inch of that lot, the way eyes do when they've spent decades learning that the thing that gets you is always the thing you didn't notice first. He noticed the girl. I didn't say anything right away. He just sat there straddling his bike for a moment, helmet off, looking at her. She was maybe 6 or 7, blonde hair so tangled it had gone almost to dreadlock on one side, a pink t-shirt with a cartoon cat on it, dirty now, torn at the collar. She was sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them, and her face was turned slightly away from the lot, like she was trying to make herself smaller than she already was. But it was her left arm that made Jack's jaw tighten. Even from 30 feet away, he could see it. The bruising started somewhere under her sleeve and bloomed out past her wrist in purple and yellow, the kind of coloring that doesn't come from falling off a bike. He knew what that looked like. He'd spent enough of his life knowing. Dex. His voice was quiet, not a shout. Dexter Boone, 6'4", 300 pounds, known in 3 states as the kind of man you didn't argue with twice, was already looking. I see her, he said just as quiet. Who's got water? I do. That was Paulie, youngest in the club at 31, still carrying the instinct to make himself useful before anyone asked. He had a bottle out and moving before the sentence finished. Jack climbed off his bike slowly. He didn't move fast toward her. He'd learned a long time ago that fast movement toward someone small and scared was never the right call. He walked at a pace that let her see him coming, let her make a decision. She didn't run. She didn't even look up until he was about 10 feet away. And then those eyes, gray-green, the color of a winter lake, came up and found him and Jack Lawson, who had faced down rival clubs' federal surveillance and 22 years of a life that would give most people nightmares. Felt something move in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't crying. That was the thing that hit him hardest. A child in that condition, sitting alone, abandoned, and she wasn't crying. She had the face of someone who had already cried all the tears that were available and had moved somewhere past them. Somewhere quiet and closed off that no 7-year-old should know how to find. He crouched down so he was at her level. His knees popped. She watched him without flinching. Hey, he said. She didn't answer. You're sitting kind of far from everyone. He kept his voice low, even, almost conversational, like they were talking about the weather. You waiting for somebody? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at his patch, then back at his face. Are you the bad guys? She asked. Something about that question, the directness of it, the complete absence of filter, made 2 of the men behind Jack actually exhale. Dex looked at the pavement. Polly pressed his lips together. Jack didn't look away from her. Depends on who you ask, he said honestly. What do you think? She considered that like it was a serious question deserving a serious answer. You have a mean face, she said, but your voice doesn't sound mean. That's pretty accurate, he said. He nodded at her arm. Can I ask what happened there? She pulled the arm slightly closer to her mouth, not hiding it exactly, more like protecting it. I fell, she said. Jack nodded slowly. He didn't push. Okay. He stayed where he was crouched level with her. What's your name? Another pause. Then Emily. Emily, good name. He gestured behind him without looking. Polly back there has some water. You want some? She looked past him at Polly, who gave an awkward little wave with the water bottle. She looked back at Jack. Okay, she said. That was the beginning. Polly brought the water. Dex hung back with the rest of the crew, keeping the lot clear without anyone having to say anything. That was something they were good at, keeping a perimeter, making space. The teenager behind the register had finally looked up and was watching through the window with her phone half raised, but she hadn't come out and she hadn't called anyone. Not yet. Emily drank the water slowly. She held the bottle with both hands, and Jack noticed that her right hand was fine, but her left had two fingers taped together with what looked like masking tape, somebody's rough attempt at a splint that was already coming loose. Who taped your fingers up? He asked. She looked down at them like she'd almost forgotten. I did, she said. This morning. Jack breathed through his nose. Smart kid, he said, and he meant it. She glanced up at him, surprised, like she hadn't expected that response. How old are you, Emily? 7, almost 8. She took another drink of water. My birthday is in 6 weeks. Then you're almost 8, he agreed. He sat down on the curb next to her. Not beside her exactly, he left a gap, a foot of space that was hers. But he sat, which meant he wasn't looming anymore, and he noticed her shoulders come down about half an inch. Where's your mom? A long pause. The kind that has it his own weight. Gone, Emily said. Gone like she left, or gone like she passed away. She looked at him sideways, and for a moment he saw something cross her face, surprise. Maybe that he'd asked the question straight instead of dancing around it. She left, Emily said, when I was 4. I don't really remember her. Okay. He didn't say he was sorry. He'd found over the years that saying sorry to people who'd gotten used to their loss sometimes felt like prodding a wound they'd already sealed over. So who are you here with? Silence. Emily. She was looking at the ground now, at a crack in the asphalt running between her sneakers. White sneakers that had been white once now, just exhausted. My dad, she said. Where is he? Nothing. Is he inside? She shook her head, small and tight. Did he leave? She didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said very quietly, like she was testing whether the words would break something. He said he'd be back. Jack kept his voice completely steady. How long ago? She thought about it. Before lunch. Jack looked up at the sky. The sun was already angling west. It was after 4 o'clock, 4 hours at least. He felt something shift in him, slow, tectonic. The way anger sometimes moves in men who've learned to keep it deep. He didn't let it show on his face. He looked back at Emily and kept his voice exactly where it had been, easy and level, like they were just talking. Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to know you can tell me the truth, okay? Whatever it is. She looked at him, those gray-green eyes steady as a compass. Who did this to you? She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She held his gaze with the kind of steadiness that only comes from having already decided something, from having already passed some internal threshold where pretending wasn't worth the energy anymore. It's my dad, she said. Sir. And the world got very quiet. Behind Jack, someone swore under their breath, low and controlled, but it was there. He didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on Emily and let a few seconds pass because she deserved the space after saying that. She just handed him something enormous, and she needed to see what he'd do with it. Okay, he said. That was all, just okay, like she'd told him something he was going to handle. Not a reaction, a response. She blinked. Are you going to call the police? I'm going to make sure you're safe, he said. That's the first thing, everything else comes after. She seemed to be processing that. He's going to be really mad, she said. Not scared exactly, just factual, like she was reporting the weather. When people get involved, he gets really mad. He's not going to touch you again. Jack said it quietly, without drama, without bravado. Just as a fact, the way you'd say the sky was blue. Emily stared at him. You don't know him, she said. I know men like him, Jack said. Another long look. Then she said, and this is the part that would stay with Dexter Boone for the rest of his life, that he'd tell his grandchildren about 17 years later. You have that same thing in your eyes that he does when he's about to do something. But it feels different. What's different about it? Jack asked. She thought about it seriously, a 7-year-old working through something most adults would have fumbled. His eyes get small when he's going to hurt something, she said finally. Yours got big. Jack Lawson had nothing to say to that. For a moment, he just looked at her, this tiny, broken, absolutely undefeated child, and let it land. Come on, he said, standing. Let's get you cleaned up. Paulie had a first aid kit in his saddlebag. He always had learned that 2 tours ago, a habit that had survived the transition from combat medic to civilian to whatever he was now. He laid it out on the hood of a car at the edge of the lot and didn't say a word, while Jack sat Emily up on the bumper and got to work. The damage was worse up close. The bruising on her arm was deep, the kind that went to the bone. The taped fingers were 2 hairline fractures, Paulie confirmed it, with 2 careful presses that made her exhale sharply, but not cry. Her left cheek had a contusion along the cheekbone. There was a healing cut on her chin, maybe a week old. And there were older marks, fainter yellow-green, with age on her upper arm and collarbone. This hadn't been one incident. This had been a pattern. Jack cleaned the fresh wounds without speaking. He worked carefully, methodically. When he had to touch her arm in a way that hurt, he said, "This is going to sting," a second before, so she was never surprised. She sat perfectly still through the whole thing, watching his hands move, with an expression that was hard to read. Wary, yes, but also something else, something curious. You've done this before, she said. Yeah. Lots of people, some, did they all get better? Jack looked up from what he was doing, met her eyes. Most of them, he said truthfully. She nodded like she appreciated that he hadn't just said yes. Dex had drifted over to the payphone on the wall of the station because Millhaven was the kind of town that still had a payphone and was making a call. Not to 911, not yet. He had a different kind of network to activate first. A man named Cobalt in Laramie who knew everything about everybody in 5 counties and owed Jack a favor going back 12 years. It took 4 minutes, and Dex walked back with a name, a history, and an address. Ryan Carter, age 34, 3 domestic disturbance calls in 2 years, all 3 dropped when the reporting party refused to cooperate. 2 DUIs, 1 conviction. Known to frequent a bar called The Spur, 30 miles east on Route 9. Last known address, a rental property on Feather Creek Road, 6 miles out of town. Dex handed the paper to Jack without a word. Jack read it, folded it, put it in his jacket pocket. Has anyone called the police yet? He asked quietly without turning. Teenager inside called 20 minutes ago. One of the men, Marco, silver-haired, observant as a hawk, said from the edge of the group. Dispatch said 30 to 45 minutes. Jack checked his watch. That was still 15 to 20 minutes away. At minimum, he looked at Emily, who was watching Paulie reorganize the first aid kit with the focused attention of someone who had learned to track what the adults around her were doing at all times. He thought about his daughter. He didn't let himself think about her often. Couldn't afford to. Cassie was 26 now, lived in Portland, hadn't returned his last 2 calls. The distance between them wasn't miles, it was years. Years of him being gone, being the thing she was afraid of, being the absence in rooms where a father should have been present. He had no right to be angry about it. He'd made choices. Choices had weight. Emily looked up and caught him staring. What? She said. Nothing. He cleared his throat. You hungry? She looked at him carefully. I'm not supposed to take food from strangers. That's a good rule, he said. You're also not supposed to sit alone at a gas station for 4 hours with broken fingers. So maybe today is a day when we're flexible. She considered that with the gravity of a federal judge. Then, do they have hot dogs? Paulie made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh and turned it into a cough. Let's go find out, Jack said. Inside the teenager, behind the register, her name tag said, Kay Wiley. She was maybe 19 and she looked like she was reconsidering every life choice that had led to the shift. Watched Jack walk in with Emily and visibly didn't know what to do with any of it. Hot dogs, Jack said, and whatever she wants. Emily studied the candy display with the seriousness of a dissertation committee. She chose a Reese's cup after considerable deliberation. Kylie rang it up without making eye contact. You called it in? Jack asked her quiet. Kylie finally looked up. Yeah, about 25 minutes ago. They said they're coming. Good. He paid cash, handed Emily her Reese's, took the hot dog from the roller and handed that over too. She ate it standing right there quick and focused the way kids eat when they're not sure how long the food will last. She okay? Kylie asked, barely a whisper eyes on Emily. She will be, Jack said. Kylie hesitated. Then lower, I saw her out there for a while before your guys pulled up. I should have, she stopped. Jack looked at her, not with judgment, just looked. Yeah, he said, and let it sit. Kylie's face did something complicated. She nodded once tight and looked away. He took Emily back outside. The next thing happened fast. One of the men, Ricky, youngest riding member 28, and still carrying the jumpiness of someone who hadn't fully figured out how to be still, came around the side of the building at a jog. Jack, phone. He held out his own cell. Jack took it. Yeah. The voice on the other end was Cobalt. Your guy Ryan Carter just used a credit card at the Spur Bar, 31 miles east. Bar called in a disturbance 6 minutes ago. Local county is responding. How drunk? Bartender told the dispatcher he'd been there since noon. Jack was quiet for a moment. He coming back this way. His car's in the bar lot, so probably not fast. Okay, thank you. He handed the phone back. Dex was next to him. So he's contained. For now. So what are we doing? Jack looked at Emily, who was finishing her hot dog 10 feet away, watching two of the older riders who had apparently started teaching her to identify makes and models of motorcycles. She was pointing at Dex's bike and saying something, and one of the riders, Big Lou, who hadn't smiled in 6 years, according to club legend, was nodding and saying something back, and the corner of his mouth was doing something that looked dangerous close to a smile. We're staying, Jack said, until someone responsible shows up and I know she doesn't go home. Dex nodded. That was enough. Jack, Dex's voice dropped half a register. I ran across something else while Cobalt was talking. Tell me. Ryan Carter has a brother named Dale Carter. Did 4 years in Rawlins, out 14 months. He's local lives 20 minutes from here. Dex paused. He's got a flag on his file. Felony weapons charge. Jack absorbed that, filed it away. Okay. Just wanted you to know the whole picture. Yeah. Jack watched Emily point at his bike, now specifically the one with the custom tank, and say something to Big Lou with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. I appreciate it. The sound of a siren reached them then. Distant, but coming closer. The law was on its way. The cruiser came in slower than the situation warranted, Jack thought. Young officer, maybe 27, the kind of careful that hasn't quite become confident yet. He got out and took in the scene. 12 Hells Angels, one child, a gas station, Wyoming afternoon, and you could see him calculating very fast. Officer. Jack walked toward him with his hands slightly out, palms visible. He'd done this long enough to know exactly how to move around nervous law enforcement. I'm Jack Lawson. We found the girl about 45 minutes ago. She's been alone since before noon. The officer, his nameplate said. Briggs looked past Jack at Emily, who was now sitting on the curb again, but with Big Lou 2 feet to her left, which somehow made it look like the biggest man on the lot was quietly standing guard. Is she hurt? Yes, we've done first aid. 2 fractured fingers bruising on the arm, and face older healing injuries on her upper arm and collar. The fresh injuries are from today. Briggs was already reaching for his radio. Her father's name is Ryan Carter, Jack continued. He's been located at a bar called the Spur on Route 9 East. Local county responded to a disturbance call there about 12 minutes ago. He's likely in custody or will be shortly. Briggs looked at him with the expression of a man recalibrating. How do you know all that? I made some calls. A pause. What kind of calls? Jack met his eyes steadily. The kind that got you information faster than the system would have. Briggs held his gaze. Young Jack thought again, but not stupid. He looked back at Emily. Something crossed his face, something human, something that law enforcement training hadn't fully layered over. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. He walked toward Emily. Emily looked up at him, then at Jack. Jack nodded once small, and she looked back at Briggs. Hi there, Briggs said, crouching down the way Jack had earlier. I'm Deputy Briggs. What's your name? Emily Carter, she said. I already told the big man everything. Briggs blinked. The big man, him. She pointed at Jack without looking at him. The one with the mean face. From behind Jack, Polly made the same sound as before, the one that wasn't quite a laugh. Briggs recovered. Okay, Emily, can you tell me what happened today? She looked at him steadily. I already said. I know, but I need to hear it from you. A pause. Then those gray-green eyes went somewhere flat and factual, the way they did when she was done pretending. My dad hit me this morning. Then he left. I waited at the house for a while and then I walked here because I didn't know what else to do. How far did you walk? I don't know, long time. Briggs was already on his radio again, relaying to dispatch. Jack heard the confirmation come back. Ryan Carter was in custody at the Spur. DUI disorderly. They were holding him. Briggs looked up. Something shifted in his face. There's a problem, he said. Jack waited. The domestic charges, they'll investigate, but it takes time. Child services has to be notified. Assessment done, the whole process. He lowered his voice, angled slightly away from Emily. Depending on the aunt or grandmother situation, she might have to go to emergency foster placement tonight. Jack felt the temperature of something inside him change. What about family? We're trying to locate. Carter's file shows a mother, Margaret Hale, different last name, she remarried. We're running her down now. How long does that take? Tonight, few hours minimum. Jack turned and looked at Emily, who was watching them both with the particular focused attention of a child who knew that the conversation happening 3 feet away from her was about her life. She's not going anywhere she doesn't know until you've found family, Jack said. It wasn't a request. Briggs looked at him. The calculation ran across his face again. Sir, you understand, I can't just... I'm not asking you to authorize anything, Jack said. I'm telling you that until you've located someone she knows and trusts, these men and I are not leaving this parking lot. A long silence. Then from the curb, clear as a bell, Emily's voice. Can they stay? Both men turned. She was looking at Briggs directly. The motorcycle men. Can they stay until my grandma comes, if she comes? Briggs opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Jack, looked at Emily, looked at the 12 bikers who were at this precise moment standing in a quiet, unhurried ring around a child eating a Reese's cup, not one of them moving, all of them just present. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, they can stay. Emily nodded, like that was settled. She looked up at Jack. Do you have a name besides the mean face one? Jack, he said. Jack. She turned the name over. Okay. She went back to her Reese's cup. You can stay, Jack. And Jack Lawson, who had spent 30 years telling himself he didn't need anything from anyone, stood in a gas station parking lot in Millhaven, Wyoming, and felt something in the region of his chest crack open just slightly. Just enough to let something in. He didn't know it yet, but it was already too late. From the tree line at the edge of the lot, barely visible, just a shape among shapes, something was watching. It had been there for a while. 3 miles down Route 9, Dale Carter sat in his truck with the engine off and his phone in his hand. He'd watched his brother's girl walk to the gas station 2 hours ago, small shape on the shoulder of the road, and he hadn't stopped. He was watching the lot now through binoculars. He saw the cop. He saw the bikers. He saw Emily, small and visible in the center of it all. He put the binoculars down and picked up his phone. The number he dialed rang 4 times. Ryan has been picked up, he said when it answered. The girls with cops and some biker crew. A pause. Yeah, I see 12 of them. Another pause. I know what I have to do. He hung up. He sat for a moment in the quiet of his truck cab. Then he started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. Dale Carter drove 3 miles east before he pulled off again. I didn't go far, just far enough to think. He sat with the engine running and both hands on the wheel and stared at nothing in particular through the windshield. Ryan was in county custody. That meant at least overnight, maybe longer if they stacked the DUI on top of whatever the girl had told those bikers. Dale knew his brother. Ryan didn't hold himself together when he drank, never had, not since their father's time, not since the thing that made Ryan the way he was had been done to him by someone bigger. Dale understood the cycle. Understanding it didn't mean he agreed with it. But blood was blood, and the Carters had never been the kind of family that let outsiders handle their problems. That was the thing that was eating at him. Outsiders. 12 of them, patches and chrome, standing in a ring around his niece, like they had any right to be there. He picked up his phone again. Dialed a different number this time. It rang once. Yeah. You know anyone in Millhaven who's close with that biker crew? Dale asked. Which crew? Angels. Wyoming chapter. Silence for a moment. Then why are you asking me that, Dale? Just answer. I know a guy who knows a guy, because I need to know who I'm dealing with before I do anything stupid, Dale said. That's why. He hung up, stared at the highway. 3 miles back, his niece was sitting in a gas station parking lot with a broken hand and a deputy who looked like he'd graduated high school last spring, surrounded by men who had absolutely no reason to care about her and were caring anyway. That was the part Dale couldn't fit anywhere comfortable in his head. He put the truck in gear. I didn't go back toward Millhaven. Not yet. Back at the Sunoco, the light was changing. The sun had moved enough that the lot was half in shadow, and the temperature had dropped the way Wyoming temperatures do, fast and without warning, like the land reminding you it doesn't owe you anything. Paulie had gone to the supply box on his bike and come back with a denim jacket club patch and all, which he'd held out to Emily without comment. She'd looked at it for a second, then she put it on. It came down to her knees. Dex watched that happen from across the lot and said nothing. But he pulled out his phone and sent a text to his sister in Casper that just said, thinking about you tonight. His sister didn't know what to do with that. She'd respond 3 hours later with a question mark. He wouldn't explain. Briggs had gotten on the phone with his supervisor and was now navigating the part of his job that they never really prepare you for in the academy. The gap between what the law allows and what the situation actually needs. He'd confirmed Ryan Carter was in county lockup in Torrington. He'd confirmed the domestic investigation was now open. He'd confirmed that Child Protective Services had been notified and a caseworker was being dispatched. The caseworker was coming from Cheyenne. That was 90 miles. 2 hours minimum, Briggs said to Jack, covering the phone with his hand. Maybe more. Jack didn't blink. We'll be here. Briggs looked at him with that expression again, the one that was still trying to categorize what it was seeing, and kept coming up without a box that fit. He went back to his call. Emily was sitting on the concrete barrier at the edge of the lot with the enormous denim jacket wrapped around her and a second water bottle in her hands. Big Lou had sat down near her again, not close, not hovering, just present the way. A boulder is present, solid and unmoving. He was whittling something from a piece of wood he'd found near the air pump, just the quiet scrape of a small knife, and Emily was watching his hands move. What are you making? She asked. Don't know yet, he said. How do you not know? Because I let the wood decide. He turned this piece over. Sometimes you think you're making one thing and it turns out to be something else. Emily thought about that. That's weird, she said. Probably, Lou agreed. Can I try? He looked at her hands, the taped fingers, the bruised arm. Maybe when those heal up. She nodded, serious. Okay. Jack stood 10 feet away and watched that exchange happen and felt the cracking thing in his chest crack a little further. He pulled out his own phone and looked at it. Cassie's name was there in his contacts. He'd called it 2 weeks ago. No answer. He hadn't left a voicemail because he didn't know what to say. He put the phone back without dialing. Paulie appeared at his shoulder. How you doing? Fine. You look like a man who's about to do something he hasn't decided on yet. Jack glanced at him sideways. Paulie was the kind of perceptive that got irritating sometimes. Mind your business. I mind everybody's business. It's a character flaw. Paulie watched Emily and Lou for a moment. She's something else, that kid. Yeah. She reminds me of... Paulie stopped himself. Of what? A pause. Nothing. Never mind. Jack turned to look at him. Paulie was staring at the ground, jaw tight. And Jack remembered then what he sometimes forgot. Because Paulie was so relentlessly functional that Paulie had a daughter too. Olivia, 9 years old, with her mother in Colorado Springs. Paulie drove down every third weekend without fail. Whatever else you said about Paulie, that was true. She's fine, Jack said. Olivia. Paulie looked up. How do you know? Because you raised her right, and her mother's good people, and she's got your brain. He looked back at Emily. This one's going to be fine too. Paulie was quiet for a second. You don't know that. No, Jack agreed, but I'm going to act like I do until I can make it true. That sat between them for a moment. Then Paulie said quietly, what happened to your Cassie, Jack? That's not the same as this. You know that. Jack's jaw tightened. I know. You were absent. That's its own thing. You didn't... I know, Paulie. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Jack's voice was flat but not hard, just closed. Leave it. Polly left it, but they both kept watching Emily and neither of them moved away. It was Marco who came in fast from the far end of the lot. Marco moved quiet for a big man who didn't always hear him coming, and the speed of his walk now was enough to pull Jack's attention immediately. Got something, Marco said low, not stopping until he was right next to Jack. Cobalt called back. He was doing a deeper run on the Carter family because he paused, because that's what Cobalt does when he's interested in something. And Dale Carter, Ryan's brother. Marco was already pulling up something on his phone. Cobalt found a restraining order from 3 years ago. Woman in Torrington alleged he showed up at her house twice after she tried to leave him second time with a firearm. He handed the phone to Jack. Charges were dropped. She recanted, but the order was in place for 8 months. Jack read the screen, handed it back. So he's got a pattern. More than that. Marco's voice dropped further. He was at that lot earlier. Jack went very still. How do you know? Because I walked the perimeter when we first pulled in. Old habit. There's a truck been parked at the edge of that tree line. He nodded toward the north end of the lot. It was there. It's not now. Pulled out sometime in the last 30 minutes. Did you get a plate? Partial, Wyoming 34 something. Cobalt's running it. Jack processed this in about 4 seconds. He was watching her. Looks that way. And now he's gone. Looks that way too. The problem with gone, Jack knew, was that gone wasn't the same as finished. Gone was sometimes just a pause, a regroup, a man who drove away from a situation and then came back with a different plan. He looked at Briggs still on his phone across the lot. He looked at Emily still watching Lou's knife work. He looked at the tree line. Put 2 men on the perimeter, he said to Marco. Quiet, no dramatics, but I want eyes on every vehicle that slows down on that highway. Marco nodded once, gone in 30 seconds. Jack walked over to Briggs, waited for a pause in the call. You need to know something. Briggs lowered the phone. What? Ryan Carter has a brother named Dale. I have reason to believe he was observing this location earlier and left approximately 30 minutes ago. He has a history with firearms. Briggs stared at him. How do you have reason to believe? That's my business. What you do with the information is yours. A long 3-second pause. Then Briggs got back on the radio and requested a welfare check on Dale Carter's registered address and asked dispatch to flag his vehicle description in the county system. He did it without asking Jack how he knew. He was learning fast, Jack thought. Credit where it was due. Emily had heard none of this. She was still watching Lou, who had apparently decided what the wood was becoming, because he'd started shaping with more intention now. And the piece was beginning to show the outline of something, a small dog maybe, or a bear, hard to tell yet. Do you have kids? Emily asked him. Lou's hands kept moving. Grown now, 2 boys. Do they talk to you? Lou paused, just briefly, just a half beat. Sometimes. My dad doesn't talk to me, Emily said. Not with self-pity, just information. He just yells, or he's quiet and the quiet is worse. She looked at the wood piece. Is your quiet the bad kind or the okay kind? Lou looked at her. Corner of his mouth did the thing again. I've been told it's the okay kind, he said, most days. That's good, she said, and meant it completely. Jack had come closer without announcing himself, close enough to hear that exchange. He stood just outside Lou's eyeline. He was thinking about what Emily had said in the first hour. His eyes got big. He was thinking about what that meant, that a 7-year-old had learned to read the difference between the violence you run from and the violence that might maybe be aimed outward instead of at her. I thought about what it cost to learn that. At 7, what it took out of a kid to have to develop that skill. His hands were in his jacket pockets, and he pressed them flat against the lining so no one would see them curl. The caseworker from Cheyenne called Briggs at 5:47 p.m., still an hour out minimum. There'd been an accident on I-25 that had traffic backed up for miles. She was coming, but not fast. Briggs relayed this to Jack. Jack nodded. They'd be here. Audi 552, Cobalt came back with the plate match. The truck near the tree line was registered to Dale Carter. Home address, Feather Creek Road, 1 mile from Ryan Carter's rental. 1 mile, Emily had walked from Feather Creek Road to this gas station. 6 miles, on a Wyoming highway shoulder. With 2 broken fingers and a bruised arm, She'd walked 6 miles before anyone stopped. Jack took that fact and put it somewhere where he kept things that he'd process later when the immediate situation was handled and he had space to be furious. He had a compartment for that. He'd spent 30 years filling it. Jack, Ricky's voice from the lot entrance low and tight. Vehicle slowing on the highway. Jack turned. A dark blue F-250 had slowed almost to a crawl on Route 9 parallel to the lot entrance. Couldn't see the driver from here. The truck rolled slow, maybe 10 miles an hour, the way a car slows when the driver's looking at something. Looking at the lot. Looking at Emily. Then it accelerated and was gone east on the highway. 12 seconds. That was all. Briggs had his hand on his radio before Jack could say anything. I saw it, he said. Can you? I'm calling it in right now. He was already talking to dispatch, relaying the description, requesting a stop. Jack turned back to Emily. She hadn't seen the truck. She was asking Lou if bears were his favorite animal or if it was something else. Lou was saying he'd always been partial to wolves because they understood the value of a pack. Emily chewed on that. We don't have a pack, she said. Who's we? Me and my dad. She turned the Reese's wrapper over in her hands. It's just us. Well, Lou said, and his voice was the quietest Jack had ever heard it, like something carefully placed. Packs aren't always the people you were born with. Emily looked at him. Sometimes, Lou said, a pack is just whoever shows up. She looked around the lot, at Paulie, who was fixing something on his bike and had been fixing it for an hour longer than it needed. At Marco standing quiet at the lot entrance. At Ricky, young and jumpy but absolutely not moving. At Dex, big as a wall and twice as steady. At Briggs, young deputy on his radio doing better than he probably knew. At Jack. Is that why you're all still here? She asked. Not to Lou specifically, to the heir to the situation. Because you just showed up, Jack answered before he thought about it. That's usually how it works. She looked at him. You didn't have to. No, he agreed, we didn't. She seemed to be running some internal calculation that involved more variables than most adults would manage. Then she said in the smallest voice she'd used since they'd found her, I'm glad you did. Nobody responded to that out loud. But something moved through the group, quiet and electric, the way certain things move when they're true and everybody knows it. It was Dex who broke it, coming in from the lot edge with his phone raised and his face doing something complicated. Jack, we've got a problem. The way he said problem put everyone in motion. Not dramatically. Just that small calibration, weight shifting, attention sharpening, that men who've been through things do without thinking. Jack moved to him. Talk. Cobalt got a hit on Dale Carter. He just used a card at a gas station in Millhaven. Dex held the phone out. 1 mile from here, 4 minutes ago. 1 mile. He hadn't gone east on the highway and kept going. He'd circled. He'd gone 1 mile into town and stopped, and now he was somewhere in Millhaven, sitting on something waiting. Briggs appeared at Jack's elbow. He'd heard enough. His hand was back on his radio. He called in the location of Dale Carter's card transaction and requested immediate units. His voice was tight but controlled. He was pulling himself taller now, some internal decision being made. Okay, Briggs said when dispatch confirmed they were routing units. He looked at Jack. I need her away from this lot entrance. Agreed. I need her inside or at least against the building away from the road. Agreed. Jack was already turning. Lou. Lou was already moving. He picked up the half-finished wood piece and tucked it in his jacket pocket, stood and held out a hand to Emily, not grabbing, just offering. She looked at it for a second. We're going to go sit over there for a bit, Jack said. By the building. Why, he looked at her. She deserved a straight answer. He gave her one. Because there might be somebody nearby who's making bad decisions, and I want you somewhere safer while the police sort it out. She looked at him steadily. My uncle, Jack went still. Why do you say that? Because that's what he does, she said. Her voice was flat and factual again, old beyond years. When my dad gets in trouble, Uncle Dale shows up and makes it worse. She took Lou's hand and stood. He scares me more than my dad does. Why, hi. She looked at Jack with those gray-green eyes, and she said something that stopped his breathing for a full second. Because my dad hits me when he's drunk. Uncle Dale watches, and he doesn't even need to be drunk. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Jack had heard all day. Then he said calmly to the air in general, tighten up. Nobody moves from this lot. The crew moved without a word, positions tightened, gaps closed, not threatening, just solid. A wall of bodies between Emily and the road, between Emily and the world, between Emily and whatever Dale Carter thought he was driving back toward. Briggs was on his radio, calling for backup priority, citing a potential armed individual in the vicinity of a child victim. His voice had steadied into something professional and hard. He was done being overwhelmed. Something had clicked over in him. Jack recognized the sound of it because he'd heard it in himself once a long time ago. The sound of a person deciding who they were going to be. Emily was against the building wall now. Lou beside her, the wood piece back out of his pocket and in her hands to look at. She was turning it over, feeling the shape of what it was becoming. "It's a dog," she said. "Maybe," Lou said. "Can it be mine?" She asked it simply, no expectation behind it. Just the honest ask of someone who'd learned not to assume the answer would be yes. Lou looked at the piece. "Not done yet." "When it's done." "When it's done," he said, "we'll see." She nodded, kept turning it in her hands. At 6:19 p.m., 2 county sheriff's units came in fast off the highway lights, cutting the early evening. 3 minutes after that, a third unit radioed in a stop on a blue F-250 heading back toward the gas station on Route 9. Driver identified as Dale Carter. The officer reported that the subject had a firearm in the cab, legally owned. He claimed legally he was correct, but the officer exercised discretion and held him pending confirmation from the ongoing scene. Dale Carter did not go quietly. Not violently, but not quietly. According to the officer's report, he stated several times that Emily was family, and that family handled family, and that nobody in that lot had any right to be involved. He said it loud enough that other drivers heard it. He said it with the absolute conviction of a man who had never once questioned whether he was right. The officer held him anyway. At 6:34 p.m., Briggs received a call from a Margaret Hale in Rawlins, Wyoming. She'd been reached by a social worker. She was Ryan Carter's ex-mother-in-law, Emily's grandmother on her mother's side. She'd thought about Emily every day for 4 years. She tried twice to get custody through the courts. Ryan Carter had blocked it both times with a lawyer she couldn't afford to fight. She was already in her car. Briggs came to Jack with this information and something in his face that was different from the careful calculation of before. It looked, Jack thought, like relief, like someone who'd been holding something heavy had just been told help was coming. 2 hours, Briggs said. Maybe less if she drives like I think she's going to drive. Jack let out a breath he hadn't been aware of holding. He went to Emily. She was still holding the half-finished wood piece. She looked up when he crouched down. "Your grandmother," he said. "Margaret, you know her." Emily's whole face changed. Not dramatically, not tears, not a shout. Just a shift, like something locked had opened a crack and let light through. "Grandma Hale." "Yeah, she's coming. She's coming." Emily looked down at the wood piece. She pressed her lips together tight for a moment. When she looked back up, her eyes were glassy, but her chin was steady. "She always smells like cinnamon," she said. "She used to make me French toast." "Yeah, every time I stayed with her." She paused. "I haven't seen her in a long time." "I know," Jack said. "She's been trying." That landed somewhere deep in Emily's face. She turned it over and over the way she'd been turning the wood piece, trying to understand the shape of it. She tried hard, Jack said. The law made it complicated, but she never stopped. Emily was quiet for a long moment. The parking lot sounds came and went around her, radio's engines, men's low voices, and she sat in the middle of all of it like a small, still point. "Does she know about—" Emily gestured at herself vaguely. The arm, the fingers, all of it. A social worker told her. That's why she got in the car. Emily nodded slowly, then she held out the wood piece to Jack. "Hold this," she said. He took it without asking why. She stood up, smoothed down the oversized denim jacket with both hands careful of her taped fingers, with the dignity of someone much older getting themselves together for something important. Then she looked at Jack. "Will you be here when she comes?" Jack looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the road. He thought about the 73 miles they still had to cover before the night camp. He thought about Cassie in Portland and the voicemail he hadn't left, and the years that felt like a highway with no off-ramp. He thought about the thing Lou said, whoever shows up. "Yeah," Jack said, "I'll be here." Emily nodded, like that was settled, like his word was something she decided to trust completely and without reservation. The way only very young people and very old people can trust fully without the protective layering the years in between tend to add. She sat back down next to Lou. She asked him what wolves ate. Lou told her in complete and accurate detail, and she listened to every word. Jack stood up and looked east on Route 9, where the evening was coming in blue and quiet, where somewhere out there Margaret Hale was driving as fast as she dared, and somewhere in a county holding cell, Ryan Carter was sleeping off whatever poison had made him into what he was. And somewhere on that same highway, the next thing was already moving toward all of them. He put the small, unfinished wooden dog in his jacket pocket. He wasn't sure why. He just knew he wasn't ready to put it down. Margaret Hale drove 91 miles in 73 minutes. Briggs clocked her arrival at 7:47 p.m. She came in off Route 9 without slowing for the lot entrance tires scraping the concrete lip, and she was out of the car before the engine fully died. 62 years old, silver hair cut short and practical, wearing a flannel shirt with a coffee stain on the sleeve. She hadn't noticed when she'd grabbed it off the chair. She was the kind of woman who had been through enough that she didn't waste time on the periphery of things. She went straight to the center. She found Emily against the building wall and dropped to her knees on the concrete without hesitating, and Emily, who had not cried once in the 4.5 hours since Jack's crew had found her, not once, not even when Polly had cleaned the wounds on her arm, made a sound that wasn't quite a word, and folded into her grandmother like something that had been holding itself rigid for a very long time, finally remembering it didn't have to. Nobody spoke. The whole lot went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with absence of sound. The men stood where they were. Briggs stood where he was. Even the highway seemed to give it a moment. Margaret held Emily with both arms completely around her, her face pressed into the tangled blonde hair, and her eyes were closed and her lips were moving, but whatever she was saying was only for Emily. And Jack stood 20 feet away and looked at the ground and breathed very carefully through his nose. Polly was next to him. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Polly said quiet, "That's what it's supposed to look like." Jack didn't answer, but he nodded once, small and tight. Margaret pulled back, first only far enough to look at Emily's face, and then her eyes moved to the arm, the fingers, the cheekbone, and something moved through her expression that was grief and fury compressed into 2 seconds and then locked down hard because Emily was watching her. And she knew you could see that she knew that Emily needed her steady right now, not broken. "I see you, baby," she said. "I see all of it." "I'm okay," Emily said. "I know you are." Margaret cupped her face. "You're the toughest thing I've ever known. You get that from your mama." She paused. "Even if your mama wasn't tough enough herself." Emily absorbed that. "She left," she said. "I know she did." "Did she know about Dad?" Margaret's jaw tightened for just a moment. "We're going to talk about all of it. Everything. No more secrets. I promise you that." She pressed her forehead to Emily's. "But not tonight. Tonight we just go home." Emily pulled back enough to look past her grandmother. She found Jack in the lot. He hadn't moved. She looked at him for a moment with those gray-green eyes steady as a compass, the way she'd looked at him from the very beginning. "Jack helped me," she told her grandmother. Quiet, matter of fact. Margaret turned. She took in Jack, all of him, the patch, the beard, the scarred knuckles, the 12 men behind him. And she did the same rapid recalibration that Briggs had done, except she did it faster and arrived somewhere different. She got to her feet. She crossed the lot toward him. Jack stood his ground, which he would have done anyway. She stopped in front of him. She was a foot shorter than he was, and she looked directly at him and said, "What's your name?" "Jack Lawson." "How long was she alone before you found her?" "We don't know exactly. Best estimate, 4 hours." Margaret closed her eyes for 2 seconds. When she opened them, they were dry. She'd already done that somewhere on the highway. "Did she tell you everything? Enough? Is Ryan in custody?" "Yes, ma'am, Torrington." "And Dale?" Jack studied her face. "You know Dale." "I know Dale Carter is the reason my daughter never got away," Margaret said, and her voice was so flat and precise, it was almost clinical. "Ryan drinks and loses control. Dale is the one who makes sure nobody gets help. He's the architect." She paused. "Is he in custody?" "He was stopped on the highway. He's being held pending the investigation." Jack watched her process that. "You should tell the investigators what you just told me, about Dale being the one who manages it." "I have told them. Twice. They wrote it down both times." Her voice didn't break. It just went somewhere dry and hard. "Writing it down and doing something with it are different things." "Yeah," Jack said, "they are." She looked at him a long moment, reading him the way Emily had, direct, no performance, just honest assessment. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "All of you. You had no reason." Jack thought about several answers. He gave her the true one. I have a daughter, he said. I stayed because I have a daughter and I wasn't there when I should have been, and I can't fix that. But I could fix this, he paused. Or try to. Margaret held his gaze. Then she did something he hadn't expected. She reached out and put her hand on his forearm. Brief 2 seconds, not sentimental, just contact. Thank you, Jack Lawson, she said. Then she turned back to Emily. Jack exhaled. Behind him, Dex said quietly, good woman. Yeah, Jack said. The caseworker arrived at 8:15, a woman named Patricia Odom from Cheyenne 50. She unhurried in the way of someone who'd seen enough of these situations that she'd learned urgency of movement didn't always mean urgency of outcome. She spoke with Briggs first, then with Margaret, then crouched down with Emily for 20 minutes in a conversation that nobody else was part of. When she stood up, her face was composed, but her eyes were doing something complicated. She came to Briggs and Margaret together. I'm recommending immediate temporary placement with Mrs. Hale pending the full investigation. The existing relationship, the child's clear emotional bond, and the distance from the father's known associates makes this the appropriate call. She looked at her clipboard. I'll need signatures and then you're free to go. Margaret signed so fast the pen barely stopped moving. Briggs came to Jack afterward. He had his thumbs in his belt and he was looking at the ground and then he looked up. You're going to want to know the DA's office is already looking at the Carter file. Both of them. What Emily told the caseworker combined with the history, the medical they're talking about filing today rather than waiting. What's that mean practically? Jack asked. It means Ryan Carter isn't going to walk out of Torrington tomorrow morning. And Dale Carter is going to have a very long conversation about what he was doing driving back toward this lot with a firearm in his cab. Jack was quiet for a moment. It's a start, he said. Briggs almost smiled. For what it's worth, you handled tonight, right? I mean that. Jack nodded once, accepted it without expanding on it. One more thing. Briggs's voice dropped. Dale Carter, when we stopped him on the highway, he said something. He paused. He said, tell whoever's running that biker crew that this isn't over. His words exactly. He met Jack's eyes. I'm telling you because you have a right to know, and because I think you already knew something like it was coming. Jack had known. The moment Marco told him about the truck in the tree line, he'd known. Men like Dale Carter didn't recalibrate. They regrouped. Noted, Jack said. Emily was ready to go. She was standing next to her grandmother's car with the enormous denim jacket still on, Paulie's still with the patch, and she hadn't taken it off and nobody had asked her to. Lou came over to say something to her and she nodded and looked at the piece of wood in her hands, the little dog shape that was almost finished. Lou said something else, and she looked up at him with an expression that was complicated for a 7-year-old, something between gratitude and a sadness so old it had already gone quiet. Jack walked over last. Emily watched him come. She held out the wood piece. You should keep it, she said. Lou said you should. Jack looked at Lou, who was looking at the sky with complete innocence. He looked back at Emily. Lou said that, he said you had pockets that needed something in them. Jack glanced at Lou again. Lou continued studying the sky. All right, Jack said. He took the piece and put it in his jacket pocket next to where it had already spent the last hour. He reached into the inside pocket and pulled out a card. It was a plain white card with a phone number and the word Jack and nothing else. He held it out. Emily took it with her good hand, looked at it. That number works any time, he said, day or night. If something happens, if Dale Carter shows up near you, if anything feels wrong, if you just need to talk to somebody, you call that number and somebody answers. Me or one of these guys. She looked up. You promise, I promise. She looked at the card for another moment, then she tucked it into the front pocket of the denim jacket. Okay, she said. She started to turn toward the car. Then she stopped, turned back, and she did something that Jack Lawson would not tell another person about for 6 years, not because he was ashamed of it, but because some things are private in the way that real things are private. She put her good arm around him and held on for about 10 seconds, her face against his jacket, not saying anything, just holding. And Jack put his hand very carefully on top of her tangled blonde hair, light as he could make it. Just present. Then she let go, climbed into her grandmother's car. Margaret Hale caught Jack's eye through the windshield and held it for 1 second, and then she put the car in reverse and took her granddaughter home. The lot felt different after that, bigger, emptier. The way places feel when the thing that was making them matter has just driven away. Dex came to Jack's shoulder. "We rolling." Jack didn't move immediately. He stood looking at the lot entrance where Margaret's car had been the empty space it left. "Yeah," he said finally. "We're rolling." They were on the highway 7 minutes later, 12 bikes in formation headed west. The night had come down properly now, full and cold, the kind of Wyoming dark that has real weight to it. Stars so bright they looked close enough to be a problem. Jack rode at the front and didn't talk. Nobody expected him to. I thought about the card he'd given Emily. He thought about Cassie in Portland, who hadn't returned to his call. He thought about the fact that those two things were related in a way he'd been refusing to look at directly for years. The reason he could recognize a child who'd learned to make herself invisible was because he'd made someone else learn it. Different mechanism, same outcome. His absence had taught Cassie to expect absence. Ryan Carter's fist had taught Emily to expect fists. The method was different. The lesson was the same: the person who's supposed to be there won't be. He'd told Emily he'd be there. He'd promised. He'd meant it. And somewhere between the Sunoco lot and the 60 miles they'd covered, since it had started to feel like something slightly larger than a promise to one child. Like something he was saying to himself. Like a man deciding to be different at 53 than he'd been at 30. Not because the damage wasn't done, but because there might still be time to do something that pointed in a different direction. Paulie rode up beside him. They ran parallel for a minute before Paulie said loud enough to carry over the engines, "You're thinking too loud." "Shut up, Paulie. Just saying, I can hear it from here." "You can't hear anything over these engines." "I can hear you think. It's a gift." Jack didn't say anything. "Call Cassie," Paulie said. "Mind your business." "I already told you. Character flaw." Paulie dropped back into formation. They stopped for gas and coffee at a truck stop outside of Rawlins at 9:40. The place was half full, mostly long-haul drivers, the kind of low-conversation quiet that belongs to people covering distance late at night. The crew took up 4 booths and a section of counter. The waitress, a woman in her 40s who had seen everything and was unimpressed by all of it, took their orders without batting an eye at the patches. Jack sat at the counter with a coffee he wasn't really drinking. Marco slid onto the stool next to him. Not Paulie this time. Marco was different, less talk, more weight. When Marco chose to say something, it was usually because he'd been sitting on it long enough that it needed out. "You know this isn't finished," Marco said. "I know. Dale Carter isn't going to stay held. The firearms charge won't stick if it's legally registered. He'll be out by tomorrow morning, day after at the latest." "I know. And he made a direct statement about the club." "I heard." Marco turned his coffee cup in both hands. "I'm not saying we go looking for it. I'm saying we should know it might come looking for us. And Emily's grandmother needs to know that her location isn't a secret. Dale knows who Margaret Hale is. He knows where she lives." Jack set his cup down. That was the part he'd been sitting with since Briggs had relayed the message on the highway. This isn't over. He'd heard those words before in various forms from various men. Sometimes they were bluster. Sometimes they were a schedule. The trick was knowing the difference, and with Dale Carter, he didn't have enough information yet to know which kind of man he was dealing with. "Cobalt's still running him?" Jack asked. "Cobalt's building a file. Said he'd have something complete by morning." "Good." Jack picked up his coffee again. "Tell him I want everything, not just the record, Employment Associates property. I want to know who he talks to and what he owns." Marco nodded. "Already told him that." Jack looked at him sideways. "You told him before I asked." "You were going to ask." Jack almost smiled. "Yeah." He drank his coffee. "Good call." At 10:22 p.m., Jack's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Wyoming area code. He almost didn't answer. He almost never answered unknown numbers. But something made him pick up. "Lawson." His standard answer. Just the name. Silence for 2 seconds. Then a voice, young female, slightly out of breath, like she'd been working up to this for a while. "This is Kylie, from the gas station." Jack was quiet for a second. "Kylie, all right. I got your number from the deputy, Briggs. He said you'd want to know if I remembered anything else." Another pause. "I wasn't sure if I should call, but I—" She stopped, restarted. "Look, I saw something tonight that I didn't tell anybody. I was scared too. I'm still scared, but I think—" Her voice steadied. "I think I should tell you." "Tell me," Jack said. That truck, the blue F-250, before it showed up on the highway, it came through the lot once, earlier. Maybe 20 minutes before your guys even pulled in. She was talking faster now, the words getting out before she could reconsider them. The driver slowed down at the lot entrance and looked. He looked right at Emily. She was on the curb, and he didn't stop. She paused. He just looked, and then he drove on. And I thought maybe he was going to come back and help her, and he kept going. Jack said nothing. Let her finish. And then he came back again later. When your guys were there, I saw him from the window of the truck at the tree line. I could see the outline of it. I didn't say anything because I didn't want. She stopped. I don't know what I didn't want. I just didn't say anything. Her voice was thin now. He saw her sitting there and he drove away. Before your guys, he was there first. The weight of that settled over the truck stop counter like something physical. Dale Carter had seen Emily on that curb before the Angels had ever pulled in. He'd seen his niece, a 7-year-old, sitting alone, bruised, bleeding, and he had looked at her and driven away. Not because he didn't know, because he did. Kylie, Jack said, yeah. You need to call Briggs and tell him exactly what you told me. Tonight, not tomorrow. I know I just needed to. A shaky exhale. I needed to tell somebody first who would know what it meant. I know what it means, Jack said. Call Briggs. Okay. You did the right thing calling, he said. Both times there's in the sound. She hung up. Jack set the phone on the counter and looked at it. Marco was watching him. What? Jack told him. All of it. Concise, no commentary. Marco sat with it for a moment. Then, so Dale Carter drove past his niece, sitting alone on a gas station curb, already hurt and already abandoned, and kept going. Yeah. And then came back once we were there. Yeah. I wasn't coming back for her, Marco said. No, Jack said. He wasn't. The implication of that landed between them, and neither man needed to say it out loud. Dale Carter hadn't driven back toward the lot to help Emily. He'd driven back to see whether the situation could still be contained, whether the girl who might talk, might tell, might finally break the silence that had been protecting his brother and himself for years, whether she could be pulled back inside the circle before it was too late. Jack picked up his phone, dialed Briggs's number. It rang twice. Briggs, it's Lawson. You're going to get a call from Kylie, the gas station attendant. Take it seriously. He paused. And I need you to do something. What? Margaret Hale's address in Rawlins. Can you get a car past it tonight? A pause. I can request a welfare check. Routine. Make it not routine. Make it something that repeats. Another pause. Longer. You think he'd go there? I think he went back to that lot for a reason that wasn't Emily's welfare. And she's not at the lot anymore. Jack let that sit for exactly the right amount of time. She's in Rawlins. Briggs breathed out. I'll make the call. Tonight. Tonight, yeah. Another pause. Lawson? What? How do you know all of this? Not challenging, genuinely asking. How do you just know? Jack thought about it. Because I've spent 30 years being the thing people were afraid of, he said. After a while, you learn to think like it. He paused. Only useful thing about that. He hung up. He sat with his coffee. The truck stop hummed around him, coffee machines, low talk. Somebody's radio from across the diner playing something country and forgettable. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked at the screen before answering. And this time he went completely still. The name on the screen was Cassie. He stared at it for 3 full seconds. 4. His daughter was calling him. At 10:41 p.m. on a Tuesday night. She hadn't called him in 7 months. He picked up. Hey. Hi, Dad. Her voice was cautious, careful, but it was there. I know it's late. I saw you called a couple weeks ago and a pause. I don't really know why I'm calling. I just was thinking about you. Jack looked at the counter in front of him. The coffee cup, the grain of the Formica, the ordinary surface of an ordinary truck stop on Route 80 in Wyoming. I'm glad you did, he said, a silence, not empty full, the kind that happens between people who have a lot of history and very few words for it, and both know it. Are you okay, she asked. Yeah, he said. Had a long day. He paused. Good day, though, I think. That's vague. I know. I'll tell you about it sometime if you want to hear it. Another pause. He could hear her breathing. He could hear her deciding something. Maybe, she said. Yeah, maybe. Okay, he said, not pushing, just leaving the door exactly as wide as she'd opened it. "How are you?" she told him. Not everything, they weren't there yet, and maybe they'd never be all the way there, and Jack had made his peace with the maybe of it. But she talked for 11 minutes about her job, about a friend who was moving away, about a plant she'd bought that she couldn't keep alive. Small things. The kind of small things that are really large things when they've been withheld for a long time. He listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer to fix anything. He just listened the way he'd failed to listen for 20 years and let it be enough that she was talking. When she said she had to go, he said okay. When she said maybe she'd call again sometime, he said he'd like that. When she said goodnight, he said goodnight, Cass. The name he hadn't said to her face in years. She hung up. Jack put the phone down on the counter and sat very still. Polly, who had appeared at some point during the call and was sitting 3 stools down, not looking at him, said quietly, "Good." "Yeah," Jack said. His voice was slightly rougher than usual. "Good." Polly nodded, drank his coffee. Didn't make it into anything. They were back on this road by 11. The night highway was empty and fast, and Jack ran the engine up and let the speed work through him. Let the cold air off the basin hit his face and clean the day out some. He thought about Emily and Rollins with her grandmother and the smell of cinnamon that she remembered from before everything went wrong. He thought about Dale Carter and the thing that was still unresolved, still out there, still moving. He thought about Cobalt building a file that would be on his phone by morning. And he thought about the card he'd given Emily, the promise behind it. You call that number, somebody answers. He'd made promises before that he hadn't kept. He knew the weight of that. He knew what promises unkept did to the person who trusted them. He'd watched it happen in his daughter's face over years, the slow closing of something that didn't fully close again. He wasn't going to do that again. At 11:58 p.m., his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He didn't answer. He was writing, and even he had lines. But at the next stop, he checked it. Text from Cobalt. 4 words. Dale Carter bought gas. Coordinates followed. Jack typed them into his phone's map and looked at the location. Dale Carter had bought gas at a station in Rawlins, Wyoming. He was 40 minutes from Margaret Hale's house. Jack stared at the screen for 1 second. Then he turned to Dex, who was the nearest, and held the phone out. Dex looked at the screen. His face did nothing visible except that his jaw set slightly. "We going back?" Dex asked. Jack was already calculating. Rawlins was 70 miles east. Briggs had requested a patrol check, but he didn't know when or how consistent. The caseworker had signed Emily out to Margaret. The system had processed the emergency and moved on the way systems do to the next emergency. Nobody was watching that house at midnight. Nobody except a man who didn't stop when he saw a 7-year-old girl bleeding on a curb. "Yeah," Jack said, "we're going back." He didn't explain it further. He didn't need to. He turned the bike east, and the 11 men behind him turned with him formation, closing engines, rising 12 bikes, pointing back into the dark, toward a town where a little girl was asleep and a grandmother was keeping watch, and a man with a very clear pattern of behavior had just bought gas 40 minutes away. The night opened up ahead of them, and Jack pushed the throttle and let the miles go under him fast. He had a promise to keep. 70 miles back east on Route 80, and Jack rode them like he was trying to outrun something. He wasn't. He knew exactly what he was riding toward. The formation was tight. Nobody talked over the comm. Dex had already called Cobalt for an updated position on Dale Carter's vehicle. Marco had pulled up the satellite map of Margaret Hale Street in Rawlins, a residential block, older houses, single-lane road, limited exit points. Paulie was on his phone with somebody Jack didn't ask about, somebody who owed Paulie a favor and happened to live in Rawlins and happened to be awake at midnight on a Tuesday. Everyone doing what they did. The machine of it was quiet and practiced, and Jack had never been more grateful for that than right now. Cobalt came back at 12:31 a.m. Dale Carter's truck had been stationary for 19 minutes on a street 2 blocks from Margaret Hale's address. Engine unknown, lights unknown, just the vehicle parked not moving. Jack called Briggs. It rang 4 times, then Briggs, groggy, off shift. "Dale Carter is parked 2 blocks from the Hale residence in Rawlins." Jack's voice was flat and fast. 19 minutes stationary. "I need you to call it into Rawlins PD right now. Not a welfare check, a threat assessment." The grogginess burned off Briggs's voice in about 3 seconds. "How do you know where he is?" "Call it in." "Lawson." "Deputy." Jack's voice didn't rise, it just compressed. There is a 7-year-old girl in that house and a man with a weapons flag who made a direct threat against my crew parked 2 blocks away at midnight. Call it in. A short, hard silence. Then Briggs was moving. Jack could hear it, sheets feet on floor. The specific sound of urgency entering a body that had been horizontal. I'm calling. What's your ETA? 40 minutes? You're coming back. Yeah. Jack, a pause. Different tone. Not official. Just one person talking to another. Let the police handle it when you get there. Jack said nothing. I mean it. You show up and make a move on Dale Carter everything tonight. Everything we built for that little girl. It gets complicated. The club gets looked at, the DA gets nervous. Defense lawyers start talking about provocation and, I know how it works, Jack said. Then you know I'm right. He did know. He hated that he knew. I'll be there in 40 minutes, he said and hung up. Paulie came up beside him at the next signal. Briggs is right, he said, which meant he'd somehow heard the conversation over engine noise, which should have been impossible, and which Jack was going to address at some point that was not now. Stay out of it, Jack said. If you put hands on Dale Carter tonight, Paulie, I heard Briggs. I'm not going to touch him. Jack looked at the road. I'm just going to be there. Paulie held his eye for a moment, then dropped back. He knew what just gonna be there meant when Jack said it. It meant I am going to put myself between this man and that child, and whatever happens after that happens. It wasn't a plan, it was a position. They covered the remaining miles in 38 minutes. Coming into Rawlins from the west, Jack took the side streets rather than the main road. Old habit, always know your alternative route. The town was quiet the way small towns are at midnight, which is to say, it was not asleep, but it was pretending to be. A few lights and windows, one dog barking somewhere. The specific quiet of people who are home and assume home is safe. Cobalt's coordinates put them 1 block out when Dex's phone buzzed. Dex read the text, said, he's moving. Which direction? Toward the house. Jack stopped the bike. The men behind him stopped. 12 engines idling. He looked at the street ahead of him. He could see at the far end of the block the shape of a truck moving, slow lights off, rolling without urgency, the way someone rolls when they don't want to be noticed. In the house at the end of that block, Margaret Hale was presumably asleep or trying to be. Emily was presumably asleep or trying to be. The truck rolled. Jack got off his bike. He didn't think about it. He was off the bike and on the sidewalk in one motion, and behind him he heard but didn't look at. He knew the sound, Dex doing the same. Hold here, he said to the group. Not loudly, just clearly. Nobody moves unless I say. He walked the block fast, not running. Running drew attention, and he didn't want to spook the truck into something sudden. Walking with purpose, hands at his sides, watching the truck's brake lights, still off, still rolling. Then the truck stopped. It stopped directly in front of Margaret Hale's house, and the driver's door opened. Jack was 30 feet away. He closed it to 15 in about 4 seconds, enough that when Dale Carter's foot hit the pavement and he straightened up from the weight, Jack was already there. Dale Carter was shorter than he'd expected, not small, wide-shouldered, with the thick hands of someone who'd worked physical labor his whole life, mid-40s, a face that had spent a lot of years in close proximity to bad decisions. He saw Jack and went completely still. The two men looked at each other for one long second. Get back in the truck, Jack said. Dale Carter's jaw moved. You've got no... Get back in the truck, Jack said again. Same volume, same tone. No movement in it, just the words placed down between them like something heavy. Dale looked past Jack at the house, then back at Jack, then down the street where the shapes of 11 motorcycles were visible in the dark, and 11 men who hadn't moved but were absolutely present in the way that a wall is present. Something shifted in Dale's face. Not fear exactly, something more complicated than fear. Something that comes from having believed your whole life that you were the most dangerous thing in whatever room you entered, and then finding a room where that wasn't true. She's family, Dale said. She's a child, Jack said. She's a child with 2 broken fingers and a bruise on her cheekbone and 6 miles of highway shoulder in her shoes. And you drove past her. Dale's face did something, a tightening. You don't know anything about my family. I know you drove past her. Jack took 1 step forward. Still no drama, just closer. I know you saw her on that curb and you kept going, and I know that you went home or wherever you went And you sat on that for a few hours, and then you drove to that gas station not to check on her, but to see if you could contain the damage. He paused. I know exactly what kind of man does that. I've known a few. Dale's hands had moved, not toward a weapon. He was smart enough to know that was over before it started, but they'd curled tight. Ryan's my brother. I know. He's not. Dale stopped, started again. It's more complicated than you're making it. It's not, Jack said. None of it is as complicated as the people doing it need it to be. That's how it works. You make it complicated so you don't have to look at it straight. He held Dale's gaze. Look at it straight. Silence. A porch light came on down the street. Somewhere a car passed a block over. Dale Carter stood between his truck door and Jack Lawson, and the calculation was running behind his eyes. Jack could see it running, and the answer kept coming out the same way, whichever direction he tried it. I wasn't going to try, Dale started. I don't care, Jack said. You're not going near that house, tonight or any night. That's the only thing that matters right now. You can't. No, Jack's voice didn't rise. But they can. He didn't move, didn't gesture. But headlights came on at the end of the block, a Rawlins PD cruiser rolling out of the dark, because Briggs had done his job, and Rawlins dispatch had done their job, and the cruiser came slow and deliberate, and put its lights on Dale Carter's truck with a kind of institutional finality that cut the last string of the situation. Dale looked at the cruiser, looked at Jack. This isn't over, he said. Jack had heard those words twice now, from Briggs relaying them and now direct. He looked at Dale Carter, and he said something he'd been sitting with since the highway, since Cobalt's text, since Kylie's phone call, about a man who had driven past a bleeding child and kept going. Yeah, it is, he said, not with heat, not with threat, with the specific quietness of someone who has decided something completely. Because here's what's going to happen. The file on your brother goes to the DA tomorrow. Your name's in that file, not just as family, but as the man who managed it, who made sure the complaints went away, who kept the circle closed. He let that settle. And Kylie at the Sunoco station is going to tell the investigators that you drove past Emily this afternoon before we ever pulled in. That's your timeline. That's your knowledge. That's the moment you made your choice. Another pause. You've been the invisible hand your whole life. You're not invisible anymore. Dale Carter went very still. The cruiser had stopped. The officer was out, hand on his door, watching the situation, waiting. Not moving yet, just present, just another body that wasn't going to yield. I want a lawyer, Dale said. His voice had changed. The bluster had gone out of it. What was left was flatter and quieter, and in some ways worse, the sound of a man who has just understood his actual position. That's the smartest thing you've said all day, Jack told him. The officer moved in. Jack stepped back. He let it happen the way it was supposed to happen, the way Briggs had asked him to let it happen, the way everything he knew about what Emily needed told him. It had to happen through the system, documented on record in a form that couldn't be walked back. He stood on the sidewalk and watched Dale Carter put his hands on the roof of his truck and watched the officer move through the protocol, and he breathed in the cold Rawlins midnight air, and he felt something in him finally go quiet. Not finished, not resolved, but quiet. Behind him, without a sound, Dex was there. Then Marco. Then the others, spreading out along the sidewalk, not interfering, not involved, just present. Just the pack the way Lou had said it. Whoever shows up. The officer had Dale Carter in cuffs and was talking into his radio, and a second cruiser was coming in now from the north end of the block. Jack watched it happen, and then he turned and looked at the house. And Margaret Hale was standing on her porch. She had a robe on. She'd heard the engines. Probably 12 motorcycles are not a subtle arrival even when they're trying to be. She was standing with her arms crossed and her eyes moving across the scene, and when they found Jack, she held steady. He walked to the porch steps, stopped at the bottom. He's handled, Jack said, quiet. You're going to want to deadbolt the door anyway. Margaret looked past him at Dale Carter being walked toward the cruiser. Her face did something that Jack suspected she'd spent years learning to hide and had finally stopped bothering. It was relief and it was rage, and underneath both of those, it was grief. The long, complicated grief of a woman who'd watched something bad happen to people she loved and had not been able to stop it and had had to live in the space between trying and failing for years. How did you know? She said. He bought gas 40 minutes from here at midnight, Jack said. The kind of man who drives past his niece on a gas station curb and keeps going, doesn't stop being that kind of man when the sun goes down. Margaret looked at him steadily. Is she safe now, truly? Jack thought about how to answer that. He could have given her the easy answer. He chose the honest one. Safer than she was this morning, he said. Dale gets formally questioned. The file on Ryan goes to the DA tomorrow, and the caseworker's report creates a legal record that makes it significantly harder for the court to return Emily to that house. That's real. That's not nothing. He paused. But safe is something you build over time. Tonight was one piece of it. Margaret was quiet for a moment. She asked about you, she said, before she fell asleep. She asked if you were going to call, like you said. Jack felt something in his chest move. I'm going to keep my word, he said. She believed you, Margaret said. First time she's believed a man who said that in a long time. That hit somewhere deep in the place where the things he couldn't fix lived. He held it and didn't look away from it. Get some sleep, he said. Keep the deadbolt on. You're going to have a social worker and probably a detective at your door tomorrow morning, and you want to be rested for that. I've been preparing for tomorrow morning for 4 years, Margaret said. He believed her. I know. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she said, whoever you were before tonight, whatever you've done or not done, I'm not the one to judge that. But what you did today for my granddaughter, I'm going to remember it every day until I die. Jack had nothing to say to that. He nodded once. She went inside. The deadbolt turned. He walked back to the street. The cruisers were gone with Dale. The block was quiet again. His men were spread along the sidewalk in small, loose groups. Nobody talking much, the particular quiet of people who'd been through something and were letting it settle. Dex came alongside him. Where do you want to stop? Jack looked up the street. He was tired in a way that was different from physical. Tired, it was the kind of tired that comes from spending a full day in the proximity of something that mattered. It had a different weight to it. Not bad, just real. There's a motel on the west side of town, Marco said. I called ahead. They've got enough rooms. Good call, Jack said. They were moving toward the bikes when Jack's phone rang again. He almost laughed. Almost. He looked at the screen and it wasn't Cassie, it was Cobalt. He answered, yeah. Thought you'd want to know immediately. Cobalt's voice was the same flat efficient instrument it always was, day or night, 2 in the morning or noon. I finished the full file on Dale Carter, Employment Associates Property. 2 things you need to know. Talk. First, Dale Carter is not employed, not for 7 months. His last employer was a private security firm out of Casper. They terminated him following an internal investigation. The investigation was about a client, a woman protective custody situation. He was accused of sharing her location with her abusive ex-partner. Jack stood still on the sidewalk. The men around him felt the stillness and responded to it without knowing why. He does this professionally, Jack said. It wasn't a question. He knows how these systems work, Cobalt said. He knows how protective placements work, how investigation timelines work, how to find information in records that the average person doesn't know is accessible. This isn't just family loyalty. He has a skill set. And you said 2 things. Second thing, a pause. The rental house on Feather Creek Road, Ryan Carter's place. It's not in Ryan's name. It's in Dale's. Dale owns the property and rents it to his brother below market rate. Jack processed that. It landed like the last piece of a picture clicking into place. He controls the housing, and therefore has legal standing to access the property, Cobalt said, and anything in it, including whatever Emily left behind. Jack's mind went immediately to what a 7-year-old girl leaves behind in a house. Clothes, maybe a toy, maybe, and this was the thing, whatever she'd used to cope. A journal, drawings, the private record of a child's private survival. If Dale Carter had been running interference for Ryan for years, he knew what to look for and what to remove. Who's been in that house today? Jack asked. Unknown. Ryan's in custody. Dale's been mobile. Nobody has been formally denied access. Can you get eyes on the property? Already done. I have someone 2 miles out. The house appears undisturbed as of 30 minutes ago. But Jack, if Dale makes bail tonight or tomorrow morning. He won't, Jack said. He made a direct threat against a club he drove to a child victim's location in the middle of the night, and he has a prior weapons flag. They'll hold him for arraignment minimum. He paused. But call whoever you have watching and ask them to stay through morning. Already done, Cobalt said again. Anything else? Yeah, the private security firm that fired him. Who's the name on the internal investigation? I'll have it in an hour. Get it, and get the name of the woman whose location he leaked. She needs to know his legal situation changed tonight. Jack paused. She's evidence he doesn't know about yet. A short silence. When Cobalt spoke again, there was something in his voice that wasn't quite respect. Cobalt was too self-contained for that, but was its near neighbor. You're thorough, Jack. I learned it from people who weren't, he said, and watched what that cost. He hung up, turned to his crew, gave them the short version, Cobalt's findings, the property situation, the prior security firm incident. He watched their faces process it. Watched the anger move through the group the way anger does through men who've just learned that what looked like one ugly thing was actually a structure, a system, something that had been built and maintained. He's been protecting this for years, Dex said. His voice was very quiet. Yeah. And the system let him. Yeah. Jack looked at the house one more time. Dark and still, deadbolt turned. That's the part that doesn't get fixed tonight. That takes longer. What does it take? Ricky asked. He was young enough that the question was genuine, not rhetorical, not resigned. He actually wanted to know. Jack thought about it honestly. People who don't look away, he said. Kylie at the gas station called me tonight. She was scared and she called anyway. Briggs took my information and acted on it without asking all the questions he could have asked. The caseworker drove 90 miles from Cheyenne because a social worker called her and said a child needed her. He looked around at his crew. None of them were required to do any of that beyond the minimum. They did more than the minimum. And us? Ricky asked. Jack almost smiled. We were in the neighborhood, he said. Polly actually laughed at that. Short reel from somewhere tired and genuine. And then one or two others, and the laughter moved through the group the way relief does when it finally gets permission, and it was brief and quiet and honest, and then it was gone, and they were back to being 12 men on a dark street in Rawlins at 1 a.m. The motel had 14 rooms and a night manager named Gerald, who was 80% asleep behind the desk, and processed 12 leather-clad bikers checking in at 1:15 a.m., with the magnificent indifference of a man who simply no longer had the energy to be surprised by anything. He handed over keys. He went back to his chair. His system worked fine. Jack's room was at the end of the block of units. He sat on the edge of the bed and took the small, unfinished wooden dog from his jacket pocket and turned it in his hands. Lou had done most of it in an afternoon, sitting on a gas station curb next to a 7-year-old girl. The shape was clear now, definitely a dog's small and solid paws forward, head slightly lifted. The kind of dog that looked like it was watching for something. He set it on the bedside table. He pulled out his phone. He was going to try to sleep, but first he did something he hadn't done in months. He opened Cassie's contact and wrote a text. Simple. 4 sentences. Had a long day. Thought about you a lot. I know I've got a lot of ground to make up. I'm going to try, if you'll let me. He sat with his thumb over the send button for a long time. Then he sent it. He put the phone face down on the table next to the wooden dog, and he lay back on the bed, still dressed, and he looked at the ceiling, and he was asleep in 4 minutes, which was for Jack Lawson practically a record. At 3:47 a.m., his phone buzzed. He was awake before the second buzz. Old habit, he picked it up. Cassie had responded. Okay, Dad, let's try. 3 words that cost her something, and he knew it, and she knew he knew it, and she'd sent them anyway. He read them twice. He put the phone down. He didn't go back to sleep. He didn't need to. At 6:30 a.m., Marco knocked. Jack was already dressed coffee from the machine in the room in his hand, phone on the bed with 3 new messages from Cobalt waiting, and 1 from Briggs from 40 minutes ago. He read Briggs first. Dale Carter arraigned at 6 a.m. Bail denied pending investigation. Judge cited risk to child victim and prior weapons flag. DA formally filing on Ryan Carter today. Multiple counts aggravated child abuse. Thought you'd want to know. Jack read it twice. Then once more. Bail denied. Filing today. He texted Briggs back, good work. Briggs responded 30 seconds later, you too, for what it's worth. Jack pocketed the phone, picked up the wooden dog from the table, and opened the door for Marco. Cobalt, he asked. Feather Creek Road property is untouched, Marco said. Carter's acquaintance network is being mapped, and Cobalt found the woman from the security firm, the one whose location Dale leaked. Her name is Sandra Voss, lives in Gillette now. He made contact. Marco paused. She wants to talk to investigators. Apparently she's been waiting 3 years for a reason to. Jack stood in the doorway with the morning air coming in cold and real. Good, he said. Tell Cobalt to connect her directly with Briggs. Already did. Jack looked out at the motel lot. The bikes were in a row covered in road dust and night cold. An ordinary morning in Rawlins, Wyoming. The kind of morning that looked exactly like any other morning and wasn't. We got somewhere to be, Dex called from 2 rooms down, coffee in hand, watching him. Jack thought about the route, the 73 miles they still hadn't finished. The road that had been there before yesterday and would be there after. He thought about the piece of white card in a 7-year-old girl's jacket pocket with his number on it and the promise behind it. He thought about Cassie. Yeah, he said, but not yet. He walked across the lot to his bike. He took the wooden dog out of his pocket and held it for a moment, then put it back. Some things you carry for a reason you don't know yet. He'd figure it out. He got on his bike and waited for the rest of them to assemble. When they did, 12 men, 12 engines, 12 lives that had intersected with one small girl's for less than a day and would carry the mark of it far longer. He looked down the road east and then west and chose west. West was always his direction. But before he started the engine, he took out his phone one more time. He didn't call Emily too early. She was sleeping and she needed to sleep. But he called Margaret Hale's number. It rang twice. Lawson, Margaret said. She'd saved his number. Of course she had. Dale Carter was denied bail at arraignment this morning, he said. The DA is formally filing on Ryan Carter today. A long silence. Then very quietly, Margaret Hale said, Oh, thank God. Jack heard something in the background. A small voice, the specific register of a child not quite awake, asking something he couldn't make out. And he heard Margaret say away from the phone, gentle and steady, It's okay, baby. Good news. Go back to sleep. He heard the small voice settle. He sat on his bike in a motel parking lot in Rawlins, Wyoming, and listened to the quiet that followed, and he let it be what it was. She's all right, he said. She slept all night, Margaret said. First thing she asked when she woke up was whether her card was still in her pocket. The card I gave her. She checked it was there before she'd go to sleep. Checked it again just now. Jack pressed his lips together. She can call any time, he said. I know. A pause. We both know that. Another pause. Jack, you're on the road. About to be. Then go, she said. You've done enough here. More than enough. Go. He started the engine. 12 engines answered. He pulled out of the motel lot and pointed west, and the road opened ahead of him, long and straight and cold and full of morning, and he let the throttle out and he went. He carried the wooden dog in his pocket. He carried Cassie's 3 words on his phone. He carried the weight of one afternoon in Millhaven that had rearranged something in him that he hadn't known needed rearranging. And 70 miles behind him, in a small house on a quiet street in Rawlins, a 7-year-old girl went back to sleep with her hand on the pocket of a denim jacket and slept without dreaming for the first time in a long time, without fear. 6 days passed. Jack covered 400 miles of Wyoming and didn't stop moving, which was how he'd always processed things that needed processing. Put them under the tires, let the road work on them, let the wind carry off the parts that didn't need to stay. The crew dispersed to their respective corners of the state after the second day. Dex went back to Cheyenne. Marco went to Laramie. Paulie drove south to Colorado Springs, and Jack knew without asking that he'd stop in to see Olivia, would probably take her somewhere she liked and sit across from her and just be present, the way men who almost lose something start doing when they realize what almost means. Jack rode alone the last 2 days. He didn't mind alone. He'd spent most of his life making a comfortable arrangement with it. On the morning of the 7th day, his phone rang at 7:52 a.m. Wyoming number, not one he knew. He answered, Lawson. A pause, small. Then, it's Emily. He pulled the bike to the shoulder without thinking about it. Hey, he said. Hi. Her voice was different over the phone, smaller. Somehow, the way voices get when there's distance and a child isn't sure how the technology is supposed to work. Is this a bad time? No, he said. This is a good time. Grandma said to ask before I called. So I asked. Good thing to do. He sat on the shoulder with the engine idling down. How are you? A pause where she was thinking about it genuinely, not just reaching for the automatic fine. My fingers hurt less, she said. The doctor said 2 more weeks and they'll be mostly okay. Another pause. I started school here. There's a girl named Bess who has the same backpack as me. Yeah, that's a good start. Grandma makes French toast every morning. She said it quietly like she still couldn't completely believe it. Every single morning. Jack looked out at the highway. That sounds right, he said. She said I could ask for anything I wanted for breakfast, and I said French toast, and she cried a little. A beat. I didn't mean to make her cry. She wasn't crying because you asked wrong, Jack said. She was crying because she was happy. There's a kind of crying that's just relief coming out. Emily was quiet for a moment. Oh, she said, I didn't know about that kind. Now you do. She was quiet again. He could hear her breathing, steady and young, and in the background, something that might have been a television or a radio, in the particular ambient sound of a house that had warmth in it. Jack, she said, yeah. Did you know my uncle was going to come to Grandma's house that night? The question was careful, direct. She was doing the thing again, asking the question straight because pretending wasn't worth the energy. I had a reason to think he might, Jack said, so we came back. You turned around and came back. Yeah, because of me. Yeah, Emily. She processed that. He could almost hear her processing it the same deliberate way she'd processed everything like a small judge weighing evidence before speaking. Nobody ever did that before, she said. Turned around because of me. Jack closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them. They should have, he said, a long time ago. I'm sorry they didn't. A pause that was longer than the others. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly different, not broken, not even close to broken, but honest in a way that cost something. I used to think there was something wrong with me, she said. That's why nobody helped. There's nothing wrong with you, Jack said. I know that now. Grandma keeps saying it. The counselor lady keeps saying it. A small exhale. Oh, it's starting to stick. Good, he said. Let it stick. Jack. Her voice shifted again lighter, almost back to the practical. 7-year-old who'd told him he had a mean face and asked Lou what wolves ate. Lou never finished the dog. Jack looked down at his jacket pocket where the small, carved shape had lived for 6 days. No, he said. He didn't quite finish it. Is it with you? Yeah. Can I have it when it's done, like Lou said? Yeah, Emily, he said. You can have it when it's done. Okay. Satisfied, clean. The deal was made. Grandma says hi. Tell her hi back. Okay. The sound of movement. Then Jack. Still here. Thank you for turning around. She said it the way she said, everything straight, no decoration, just the true thing placed down where he could see it. I mean it. He didn't trust his voice for a second. Took the second. You're welcome, he said. Call me anytime. I will, she said. And he believed her completely, and she hung up, and he sat on the shoulder of the Wyoming highway for 3 full minutes without moving. Then he called Lou. Lou answered on the second ring, which for Lou was practically breathless urgency. Yeah. The dog, Jack said. Finish it. A pause. You talked to the girl? Yeah. She asked about it. Yeah. Lou was quiet for a moment. Jack heard the sound of a drawer opening somewhere on Lou's end, the specific dry scrape of wood on wood, a piece being picked up. Give me a week, Lou said. Take what you need. Jack. What? She's going to be all right, Lou said, not as comfort, as information. Lou didn't do comfort, he did assessment, and he was rarely wrong. I could tell. I know, Jack said. I know she is. He put the bike back on the road. 2 days later, the call he'd been waiting for came from Briggs. Not a late-night emergency this time, mid-morning professional, the voice of a man who'd settled into something steadier than the overwhelmed deputy at the gas station lot. Formal charges filed on Ryan Carter, Briggs said. Aggravated child abuse, child endangerment, 2 additional counts the DA found in the prior incident record. He's looking at significant time. And Dale, formal charges for making criminal threats, stalking, and the DA is reviewing the security firm incident. The woman Sandra Voss gave a full statement. It's strong, Jack. It corroborates a pattern. A pause. Dale Carter isn't walking out of this. Jack exhaled slowly. The property on Feather Creek Road. DA's office has a hold on it pending the investigation. Emily's personal effects were inventoried and are being held as part of the case documentation. A pause. There wasn't much. Some clothes, a few drawings. Jack thought about a child's drawings in an evidence box in a county DA's office in Wyoming. Make sure Margaret gets them eventually, he said, when it's appropriate. I'll note it, Briggs said. Then, there's something else. Jack waited. The DA's investigator went through Dale Carter's phone records. He'd been in contact with at least 3 other individuals in the county, men with similar history, similar situations, covering for each other, sharing information about how to navigate reports, how to identify when someone's called child services. A pause. It was bigger than one family. Jack sat with that, the way a structure sits with you, when you finally see the whole of it, not just the piece you happen to walk into, but the weight and size of the thing behind it. How many families, he asked. The investigator is still mapping it. At least 4 that we know of, possibly more. Briggs's voice was tight with something that wasn't quite anger. It was the thing beyond anger, the thing that comes when you understand the full scope of what you were standing next to without knowing it. Dale Carter was the hub, the guy who knew how to make problems disappear. Until he didn't, Jack said. Until he didn't. A pause. You know what broke it open? Kylie, Jack said. Kylie, Briggs confirmed, a 19-year-old gas station attendant who was scared and called anyway. That's what cracked it. He paused. I wanted you to know that, because you told her she did the right thing. I think that mattered. Jack thought about Kylie at the register phone, half raised, doing nothing for too long, and then doing something. The weight of that small pivot. How many things turned on exactly that the moment someone decided to act on what they already knew was right? Good, he said. She should know she changed something real. I'll make sure she does. A longer pause. Last thing, Margaret Hale filed for permanent guardianship this morning. With the Carter case the way it is, her attorney says it's essentially uncontested. 6 weeks, maybe 8, and it's done. Jack didn't say anything for a moment. He was on the road engine running, and the sound of it felt right for the moment, constant, forward, purposeful. 6 weeks, he said, maybe 8. Emily will be 8 by then, Jack said. Her birthday's in 6 weeks. Briggs was quiet for a second. Yeah, he said, I guess it is. They stayed on the line for another moment without speaking. 2 men who'd stood in the same gas station lot 7 days ago on opposite sides of a situation and had found somewhere in the middle of it that they were working in the same direction. Briggs, Jack said, yeah, you did your job right that night. I want you to know that. Another pause. So did you. His voice was genuine, unguarded. For what it's worth, and I know it's complicated, coming from a badge to a patch, what you did that night was the right thing, all of it. Noted, Jack said, and he meant it. He hung up and rode. The twist came on a Thursday afternoon, 9 days after Millhaven, and it came from a direction he hadn't anticipated. Cobalt called. Cobalt didn't usually call in the afternoon, mornings, or late nights were his hours. The afternoon call meant something had moved fast. Talk, Jack said. Patricia Odom, Cobalt said, the caseworker from Cheyenne who processed Emily's emergency placement. I remember her. She filed a formal complaint this morning against her own department. A pause. Against the process that allowed Emily Carter's situation to go unaddressed for as long as it did. There were 2 prior reports, 2 filed with child services over the past 18 months. Both were investigated. Both were closed without action. Jack felt the familiar cold settle in. Closed by who? Different caseworkers, different offices. But Cobalt found something in the records. A pause that had weight in it. Both closures were preceded by a phone call to the reporting department from Dale Carter, posing as a family advocate, providing context, explaining the situation away. The structure was even larger than Briggs had said. Dale Carter hadn't just been protecting his brother from consequences. He'd been actively working the system, using his knowledge from the security firm, his understanding of how child services intake processes work to intercept and neutralize reports before they ever became action. 2 reports, 18 months. A 7-year-old girl. Odom, Jack said. She's going public with this. Her complaint is internal for now. But Cobalt says she was talking to a journalist in Cheyenne this morning. A good one who covers child welfare systems. A pause. It won't stay internal long. Jack exhaled. Good, he said. It shouldn't. There's more. Cobalt rarely stacked things, so when he did, Jack paid attention. The journalist, she called Briggs for comment, and Briggs told her that the case broke open because a group of bikers at a gas station refused to look away. A pause. She wants to talk to you. Jack was quiet. Jack, I heard you. It could help, Cobalt said. Not for the club, I know you don't care about that, but for the case, for Emily, for the other families. If someone puts a public face on how this was handled, on what Dale Carter was doing systemically, it becomes harder to bury. Jack thought about standing on a porch in Rollins at midnight, telling Margaret Hale that safe was something you built over time. He thought about 6 weeks until Emily's birthday, until the guardianship was done, until she was on the other side of the legal process that had failed her twice already. He thought about the other families Briggs had mentioned, the ones still inside the circle that Dale Carter had drawn around them. Give her my number, he said, but not yet, after the DA files the full case. After the guardianship is done, he paused. After Emily doesn't need to be in the middle of it anymore. Understood, Cobalt said. I'll hold it. Thank you, he paused. Good work, all of it. That's what I do, Cobalt said, and hung up. Jack rode for a long time after that, without calling anyone, without checking anything, just the road and the engine and the Wyoming afternoon doing what Wyoming afternoons do. He thought about systems, about the way things are supposed to work, and the gap between that and how they actually work and the people who live in that gap. He thought about a caseworker who drove 90 miles in the dark because a social worker called and then filed a complaint against her own department because she couldn't unknow what she'd seen. He thought about a 19-year-old who called scared and called anyway. I thought about 12 men who pulled into a gas station on an ordinary afternoon and left it different. He pulled off at a rest stop. Quiet afternoon, almost nobody there. He sat on a picnic table and took out his phone. He called Cassie. She answered on the third ring. Dad? Hey. He leaned his elbows on his knees. Do you have a few minutes? Yeah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He paused. I want to tell you something that happened last week, if you want to hear it. A pause. Careful. She was always careful now, the way you're careful after years of disappointment have taught you to ration your expectations. He understood that. He was done being hurt by it. Okay, she said. He told her. Not all of it, not the details of the investigation, not Dale Carter on the Rollins Street, but the shape of it. A little girl on a curb. The moment she'd said, "It's my dad, sir." The card. The promise. Turning the bikes around at midnight. The phone call at 7:52 a.m. when Emily said nobody had ever turned around because of me before. He told her that part, and then he stopped talking. The silence that followed was long. He let it be long. He didn't fill it. Then Cassie said quietly, "You turned around." Yeah, because you promised. Yeah, another silence. He heard her breathing. He heard her thinking through something that was taking her time to reach. You never turned around before, she said. Not accusatory, not even grieving, just honest. The way Emily was honest, the true thing placed down without decoration. No, he said, I didn't, that's true. What changed? I thought about how to answer that. How to say a 7-year-old girl in a pink t-shirt looked at me and said, your eyes got big and I haven't been the same since. How to say I saw what absence costs from the other side of it, and I finally understood what I'd been doing. How to say all of that without making it an excuse or a performance. I understood something I'd been avoiding, he said, about what it costs when the person who should be there isn't. Cassie was quiet for a long moment. Then, is she okay, the little girl? She's going to be, he said. She's got people around her now. Good, a pause. Dad? Yeah. I don't know if I can, she stopped, started again. I don't know how much I can give right now, in terms of us. I don't know if I can just start over. I'm not asking you to start over, he said. I'm asking if I can start. The distinction landed. He heard it land. He'd thought about how to say it for 6 days, and it came out right on the first try. And he was grateful for that because you didn't always get that. Okay, she said, slow, careful, real. Okay, Dad, start. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds. Thank you, Cass. They talked for 23 minutes about nothing in particular and everything that mattered. She told him about a hiking trail she'd done the previous weekend, about a documentary she'd watched that made her think about something her high school science teacher had said. He told her about a diner in Rollins that made the best biscuits he'd ever encountered, and about a stretch of highway outside of Laramie where the stars looked close enough to be a problem. Small things, the kind of small things that are the foundation of something real when you lay enough of them side by side. When she said she had to go, he let her go. When she said she'd call again this weekend, he said he'd answer. When she said goodbye and used the word dad again, natural, easy. Like it hadn't been rationed for years, he held on to that for exactly as long as it deserved. Then he put his phone in his pocket. 3 weeks later, Lou drove to Rawlins in his pickup truck. He didn't call ahead. He pulled up to Margaret Hale's house on a Saturday morning and knocked on the door with the finished wooden dog in his jacket pocket. Margaret opened the door and looked at him, 6'4", 300 pounds, iron gray beard, face that looked like it had been through everything twice. She took that in. "You're one of Jack's men," she said. "Lou," he said, "I made something for Emily." Margaret opened the door wider. Emily came to the door in pajamas with a cartoon cloud pattern, hair still tangled from sleep. And she looked at Lou, and recognition came into her face immediately. "You finished it," she said. "Told you I would." He held it out. She took it with both hands. The fingers were better now, still slightly tender, but functional, the splint gone. She turned the small wooden dog over in her palms. It was smooth now, sanded to a finish, the grain of the wood showing warmth through it. The dog's head was lifted, watching. She looked at it for a long time. "What's his name?" Lou asked. She thought about it seriously. "Then Jack," she said. Lou pressed his lips together. "Might confuse things," he said. "No, it won't," she said. "The real Jack knows who he is." Lou looked at her for a moment, then he nodded once, the way he agreed to things that were correct. "Okay then," he said. She held the small carved dog to her chest with both hands, the way you hold something you have been waiting for. Then she looked up at Lou. "Is he coming, the real Jack?" "He said he'd try to get out this way in a few weeks." "Okay." She looked at the dog again, smiled small and private, just the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile that belongs entirely to the person making it. "I'll wait." She went back inside. Margaret stood in the doorway and looked at Lou for a moment. "How is he?" she asked. "Jack." Lou considered the question the way he considered all questions, fully, without rushing. "Better," he said, "working on something." He paused. He talked to his daughter. Margaret nodded slowly. "Good," she said. 6 weeks, and 4 days after a convoy of motorcycles rolled into a dusty Sunoco in Millhaven, Wyoming, a family court judge in Carbon County signed the permanent guardianship order placing Emily Carter in the care of Margaret Ruth Hale. The signature took 11 seconds. The process it completed had taken 4 years, one afternoon, 12 men, 1 deputy, 1 caseworker, 1 gas station attendant who had been scared and called anyway, and 1 small girl who had sat alone on a curb and answered an honest question with an honest answer and changed everything that came after. Ryan Carter entered a guilty plea 2 months later. The DA's office credited Emily's testimony given in a closed session to a forensic interviewer without a single tear and with complete precision as the most coherent and detailed account of sustained abuse they had encountered in a decade of such cases. The judge, in delivering the sentence, used the word courage. He used it specifically about Emily. Dale Carter's trial was longer, more complicated, and ultimately resulted in conviction on 3 of 5 counts. The journalist from Cheyenne published her story the week before the verdict. It ran in 4 Wyoming papers and was picked up by 2 national outlets. It described in careful documented detail the network Dale Carter had maintained and the system he had exploited. It described 2 prior reports closed without action. It named Patricia Odom as the caseworker who refused to let it stay buried. And it mentioned in the second paragraph that the case had broken open when 12 members of a motorcycle club refused to drive past a child sitting alone on a gas station curb. Jack read the article on his phone parked at a rest stop on I-80. He read it twice. He put his phone away and sat for a moment with the ordinary sounds of highway and wind. Then he started the engine. He had a promise to keep. Emily Carter turned 8 years old on a Saturday morning in her grandmother's kitchen with French toast and candles and the wooden dog named Jack sitting on the table where she could see it. When she blew out the candles, she didn't tell anyone what she wished for. But Margaret Hale, who had spent 4 years trying to get to this morning, looked at her granddaughter's face in the light of 8 small flames and understood that whatever it was already coming true. An hour later, the sound of motorcycle engines came down the street. Emily heard them before anyone said anything. She was in the living room and she went still, head tilted, listening the way she'd learned to listen for sounds that meant something. Then she ran to the window. 12 bikes, chrome and leather and road dust, coming down the street like something that didn't apologize for taking up space. She was out the front door before Margaret could say a word down the porch steps in her socks standing on the sidewalk when Jack Lawson cut his engine and got off his bike and looked at her. She looked at him. "You came," she said. Told you I would, he said. She crossed the sidewalk at a run. He caught her this time without hesitation, both arms around her completely, her feet off the ground, her face against his jacket, and he held on as long as she needed him to, which was long enough that three of his men found very important things to look at in other directions. When he set her down, she stepped back and looked up at him with those gray-green eyes, steady as ever, the compass that had known him from the beginning. Your eyes are big again, she said. Yeah, he said. They are. She took his hand, her healed hand steady and sure, and pulled him toward the porch where Margaret stood in the doorway with coffee and the particular expression of a woman who has been through too much to be surprised by grace, but is grateful for it anyway every single time. Behind Jack, 11 men followed. They filed into Margaret Hale's small yard with the unforced ease of people who knew when they were exactly where they were supposed to be. They were loud and leather-clad, and they brought the smell of highway with them, and Margaret's neighbor from across the street stood in her doorway and stared with her hand on her phone and then slowly put the phone away. Because what she was looking at wasn't a threat, it was a birthday party. And inside that house, around a kitchen table with French toast and candles and a small carved wooden dog, something that had been broken for a very long time was quietly, stubbornly, irreversibly becoming whole. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be seen. Emily Carter had waited 7 years, 6 miles of highway shoulder, and 1 afternoon on a gas station curb. In the end, it was enough because the right people finally looked, and this time they didn't look away.